Hi, everybody. Welcome to our virtual class. This is going to be the class using the Dogwood panel die and the Pixie Powders. So we're going to play around with some Pixie Powders. We're going to do that first so that we can let our backgrounds dry. And then we're going to use the Dogwood panel die, and hopefully we can create 2 cards this afternoon. So I hope everybody's got some supplies, and I'm just going to go through that. So I will just switch my cameras and then we'll get started. So I hope everybody's having a good day so far. All right. So these are the cards we're going to make today. This one is we're going to cut out the Dogwood panel and then use the floral or the leaves. And then this is our background with the Pixie Powders. Oh yes, and here we actually are going to paint with the Pixie Powders, the stems and the flowers. That's why it's yellow. And then this, we're going to use the Pixie Powders as a background to create that background for the design. And we're going to make our designs 3-dimensional. And so this is what came in your kit, the Dogwood panel die from Sue Wilson. So it has the 2 panels, and it also has the frames around it, and it has a little butterfly. So we're going to use all of them in our cards today. And then you should have received 2 colors of Pixie Powders. So we're going to use Aqua Lagoon and Sun Yellow. And then we're going to mix them to create the green. So there's lots of ways you can use the Pixie Powders, and we're just going to use kind of 1 or 2 ways this afternoon, but I'm going to demonstrate how you might use them in other ways, or the way they were actually meant to be used. I'm just going to put a few things away. And then you should have received a sticker line sheet. I have a corner and a border, but I think you just received the lines, and we're just going to use straight lines today. But this is the only one I had in my stash that was readily available. So Pixie Powders, we're going to start with the Pixie Powders because we have to let our background dry. So hopefully you have a spray bottle. I have a small little spray bottle here. And I also we're going to use some paintbrushes. My paintbrushes, there's no special paintbrush that you need. However, you need something to spread the Pixie Powders out a little bit. So I've got a couple of selections here because we're going to try and create this sort of yellow at the top and blue at the bottom. If we do the yellow first, if you only have 1 paintbrush, not to worry, we can do the yellow first and then go into the blue so that you're not mixing the colors. So you still have a little bit of yellow at the top of your design. And there, I don't know, you could have all blue, you could have all yellow, it doesn't really matter. But the combined Pixie Powders are really pretty, and they will sort of just go into each other, each color. You can see there's a little bit of green here. So they flow into each other and dry really nicely. So the paper we're going to use today, I'm going to use some watercolor card. So I have some watercolor card here. We do have some on the website, but it's not necessary to have watercolor card. I know in the instructions I wrote water tolerant paper because we do want the colors to mix a little bit on the paper. I'm going to show you how it might look if you don't actually have water tolerant paper, because it's not going to mix as well. So I have a couple things I'm going to show you, and I'll use them as I demo the Pixie Powders, maybe just before we get started. So this is my watercolor card. It's nice and bright white. Sometimes watercolor card's a little bit on the creamy color side, but this one happens to be bright white. Then I have this, I know, is what I call water tolerant paper. So although it's not watercolor card, it holds water. It might roll a little bit when I dry it, but it's good. And that's basically what I usually use for my designs. Then I have this paper here, which is what I usually use for my background card, and it's not water. If I didn't have to spray water on it, it would be fine. So I could paint on it, which we'll do a little bit later. But if I get it too wet, the color just sort of sinks into the paper and it doesn't really spread out nicely. So I'll show you how things look on the different papers. Now, so this is just kind of a demo so you understand Pixie Powders. And I'm going to just do it on here. So Pixie Powders are powder. They come in the container that has a nice little opening, so you can just get a tiny little bit out at a time. And basically what you do, you can start on wet paper. I tend to start on dry paper. So I usually start on dry paper and then spray the water on. So what you do is you just hold it over your paper and you just gently tap on the bottom of the container, and you don't need very much. Now, when I spray, I'm going to put a little bit of the yellow here as well. Okay. Now you can mix them all over. That would be fine too. I tended to go in the way we're going to use it today. And then I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm going to hold it higher up. Now you notice I have a black pad and I have a beige pad. So we do have these craft mats available on the website as well. Sorry, I'm just moving some of the things I had cut out so it doesn't get sprayed. And now I'm going to hold it about 6 inches above, and you can see, I guess you can see a little bit on the camera, the spray. Now, Pixie powders are really color burst powders. So they burst and you'll get a variety of shades. So the Aqua Lagoon has like a darker blue, and you can see how it's going to run a little bit. The yellow. And there's different colors. So you could just leave it. I could add a little more water. I could add a little more powder. I think I had a little clumpy powder. Okay, there you can see. Maybe we'll make. And you can add quite a lot of water too, because this is sort of, this is water tolerant paper. So it's going to let the water move. And you see, I can mix it. You can see how I'm going to get a whole mixture of colors here, but this is what we're going to do a little bit later. But you can just leave it. And then on this kind of paper, it will sort of mix together as it, you can see it all starting here to mix together. And if I leave this, I'll show it to you again at the end, but it kind of will meld all together. Now I have quite a bit of water here in the center. It might, you can see how it's running a little bit there. And then I didn't grab a piece of newspaper. Often if I have something that's quite wet, what I will do is I will put it on top of some newspaper so that that helps, it will absorb or keep, it just helps it dry better. So this was water tolerant paper. You can see how the colors will mix. You just have to be a little bit patient. And then I have this paper that doesn't really like to be, it can be sprayed a little bit, but not a lot, not what you kind of need for the Pixie powders. So I'm just going to put a few on here. And again, you don't need very much. Your Pixie powders will last you a long time. All right. Now I'm going to spray again. So this is quite a very pretty background too. It's hard maybe for you to see. But what this tends to do, this paper, is the color doesn't really spread very much. It just stays in, you can see if I try and mix it, it just stays Yeah, it's
Why
hard to
am I
see.
not getting sound?
I can hear somebody saying they can't get sound. Hopefully. Oh, what would, sorry. Yeah, water. Oh, so watercolor paper. So what I call water tolerant, it was just by chance, but you can buy some cardstock at Staples. That's what this is. And it's just, when I used it, I know that it handles the water. It's sort of trial and error. But if you wanted to make sure your paper tolerated water, just use watercolor paper, because watercolor paper is a little bit thicker and it absorbs water and lets anything you put on top of it move. But this sort of, once you put it down, it stays there and it doesn't really spread around. It's hard to see. The cameras, it seems not so clear, but anyway, that's kind of, so these are the Pixie powders. And today we're just going to use them almost as a paint, but we're going to let them sort of meld together. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my mic down and grab some newspaper so I can put this aside and then we can look at it again a little bit later. I'll be right back. Okay.
Mute my computer audio.
Stop. Oh, can somebody just mute themselves? I don't know who's, maybe here, I'm gonna mute. Okay. All right. So Pixie powders come in many, many colors. The Pixie powders that are part of the kit today are the original Pixie powders. They come in Pixie sparkles. See, no, there's a lot of glare here. The Pixie sparkles have more mica in them, and the Pixie powders have mica in them as well, but the Pixie sparkles have more mica, and hence the name sparkle, because they do sparkle a little bit more. And there's many colors in those. And then there's also Pixie bursts, which just came out, and they have no mica in them, and they're kind of the primary color, so brighter colors. Pixie powders you can use as paint, and that's what we're going to do to paint our flowers today. And so they are versatile. So what I'm going to do now is get my piece of watercolor card. So hopefully you have some paper ready to go. You can see how I already picked up some color that was left on my mat. So it is a good idea to have a paper towel or something handy so you can wipe up the water that you're spraying. So in order to make our designs today, I wanted to have some yellow on one side and the aqua lagoon on the lower half. So however you're going to work it, one side has a little bit of yellow and one side has the aqua lagoon. And just tap a little bit of powder onto the paper. I would tap both colors on, and we're only going to use, we can make 3 cards out of this size. This is like an A5 size that I have here. And now you're going to take your spray bottle and just spray a little bit and see what happens. And then you can spray more if you want it. I'm going to take my, I have a glass of water so I can rinse my paintbrush out. Maybe I'll take the new one because I'm going to spread the yellow out. So I want a little more of a solid color. So the more powder you add, the darker the yellow will be. And the more water you add, the lighter it will be. So I've kind of done my yellow. If I only had one paintbrush, then I can go down and do the Aqua Lagoon, and I'm just spreading it around. It doesn't have to be perfect because the water will still make the color spread. I'm going to add a little bit more. You can see how there's sort of a green in the transition. And if you want a little more transition, you can just spread a little bit more of the blue. All right. So does anybody have any questions? Not yet. Okay, so hopefully everybody is sort of playing with their Pixie powders. And then we're just going to let this panel dry. So although it looks like there might be, that's just shading. It's pretty much one color. You can see little bits here, but as you wait, and if you spray a little more water, it's just going to move and blend really nicely. It really will. We just have to be patient. And I know it's kind of hard when you're crafting to be patient, and I'm just going to quickly go and get something to wipe my hands because that I didn't grab either.
She walked away. So.
All right.
Put
Sorry
yourself,
about that.
Huh?
put yourself on mute.
Why?
Okay, so I'm just going to wipe up my excess here, and then I'm going to leave this aside, and I'm going to let it dry. Now, if I had planned ahead, I could always take another piece of watercolor card and wipe all of that up and use it as another background. And often I will do that, especially if I'm making several at a time. So you can see how this is starting to all blend really nicely. So I'm going to put this aside to dry. And now I'm going to roll up my little craft mat here and wipe this one out so that I don't get things dirty. Okay, so now we're just put your paintbrushes aside. We will use them a little bit later once we cut our dogwood panel out, and then we're going to paint them. So you can put that aside. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do some cutting. So I don't know if anybody's had a chance to prep ahead, but I'm just going to put this, it just is a little bit easier to see. We need a 5x7 card. So if you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet and you cut it 10 by 7 and then fold it in half along the 10-inch side, you'll get a 5x7 card. So if you haven't done so, if you go ahead and cut that, and then we're also going to make an A2 size card. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So basically a half of an 8.5 by 11 sheet. So you get 2 cards out of a single sheet of the A2, and then you need to make a 5x7. So I have mine ready to go because this is going to allow me to check the questions and make sure I haven't missed any. All right, so Nancy was saying that she likes the Pixie powders, but she was using a lot. So really you only need a little bit and you'll get a great result. Yeah, so you can always add more. I think most things in crafting, start off with a little bit, because you can always add more, but you can never take things away. That's one of the issues, especially like with inks as well, if you're working with inks. The Pixie powders are water-based. You'll notice that I already have stained fingers, but it doesn't take long. If you scrub them a little bit, they will, it will come off. And if you wanted, you could wear gloves if you're doing this. But I find after I finish working with them, I just use a little bit of soap and scrub them, and they'll come fairly clean. And by the next day, they're definitely clean. All right, so hopefully people have their paper cut, and then you are going to need, because we're going to also cut the panel. So in the card, you have the background card, and then we're going to make, this is the Pixie powder background we already made, and then we need a panel here that we're going to cut the dogwood into. And this panel is 2 inches wide by 6 inches long. So you need a little strip of paper 2 inches by 6 inches. So I have my piece of paper here. So hopefully you can cut that as well. And then you're going to have a few leftover pieces. You're going to need a green piece. And then you're going to have a few leftover pieces from the 5x7 card. And you're going to cut a piece 1 inch by 7 inches. And that's for the little strip that we're going to add on the side with some embossing. So if you want to cut a 1 inch by 7 inch piece from your scrap, then we'll have that ready to go as well. Once you have those strips cut, then we will be cutting the dogwood panel. I'm going to move this out of the way a minute. So you'll notice that the dogwood panel dies come with their frame. So for the greenery piece, we're going to use the frame and we're going to cut it out. And you can see that in this sample here, we're using the frame with the die. But what's nice as well is that you don't have to cut it in a frame. So you can just cut it inside the card, which is what we're going to do with the dogwood panel inside the strip. So I don't have the frame attached. And if I'm going to use a frame, I just use, this is just some painter's tape. So it's kind of a low tack tape. So it doesn't really, it wouldn't, you could get it off your card fairly easily and it doesn't rip your cardstock. So I just use that to attach my dies so that they're not going to move on me, and I have a frame that is equal all the way around. So that's just a little tip for that. For this one, you could use low tack tape as well to just tape your die in place. I'm pretty good with my machine, so I usually just eyeball it, but you can use some low tack tape. Maybe I'll use it today because I'm not standing up, so it's a little more challenging. Okay, so when I attach my low tack tape to my die cut, I like to put it onto a piece of paper that's going to cut out so that I don't really have to worry about it. So in this die, I'm going to put it in here because I know this is going to cut out. So that way it doesn't matter if there. So that's how I'm going to tape my die as opposed to the frame, because the frame is part of the card, right? We're going to raise it up, and this frame piece, we don't want to have that, any blemishes on it. So by doing that, you're going to avoid that. So I'm just going to get my die cutting machine ready here. So I've got my, I'm going to put it on my, and I'm just going to go ahead and die cut this. Now, as you die cut it, leave it in the die because we're going to emboss it with our rubber mat. So any of the dies that have some holes in them will emboss. And this one does allow you to emboss. It creates a nice pattern on each of the flowers. So you want to emboss it as well. And we'll go through that. So this I didn't have tight enough in this machine. The little machine I have on my table, I only use for classes. So it has a little bit different settings. All right, so this one's good. So now before I remove my die cut, so I can just look on the back and I can see that everything cut. So now what I want to do is I want to take my rubber mat. So hopefully everyone has a rubber mat. They do come with most of the die cutting machines. And I think like we do have them at the warehouses or at the retail store as well, if you don't have one. And now I just have to adjust my machine. My machine, I can just adjust based on the thickness, but because the rubber mat has some thickness to it, you do need to adjust it. So whatever machine you have, usually there's instructions that come with it that show you what sandwich you need to make to emboss with the rubber mat. All right. So in this die, you can see the little lines in the dogwood. There with the rubber mat, it gets pushed up, and so the paper gets an embossed look to it. So now I'm going to remove my die cut and just get rid of all my little extra bits. And you can see how it did a nice job of embossing. Because even like the little round leaves, I guess they're leaves or buds, they are also have some dimension to them. So it really does make a difference when you see the die not embossed and when it's embossed. Like you do see quite a difference. And so if you're not used to doing that, then take a look at your dies, because often there's areas that can be embossed. Some dies won't, especially if they're flat with no holes in them, they won't emboss. So you don't even have to really try. But certainly the Sue Wilson and the Creative Expressions dies often will emboss. And sometimes if I'm doing crafts, if I'm going to layer my die cuts, then I won't bother with the embossing step for the bottom layer. But in this instance, we're going to see the little leaves, so it is good to do both. So that's our dogwood panel for the front of our 5x7 card, and we're going to put the Pixie powder background once it dries in behind. But now what you want to do is you want to cut a few more of the dogwood panels and emboss them. So I have a few cut here, but I'm going to just go through it with you, just so I can give you a few little tips. So for the dogwood panel card, we're going to add one of each of the flowers on top. So we need each of the flowers. So you can choose to cut a full panel again, because that would be reasonable. But if you had a bunch of scrap paper, you could cut the scrap paper and just sort of fit it in. So sometimes if I'm just using a part of a die, so say I only wanted the 2 flowers, then I would just cut this piece and just cut the 2 and use up some of my scrap paper, because I don't really need all of it. But for our, so to add it to the 5x7 card dogwood panel, we need all of the flowers. But then for this card, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the leaves out, and we're missing one of the flowers here. So you would need to cut it all again, because then we want to color it and then place it on top of the card. But then you're going to just need 3 flowers to add to that one. So you need to cut 3 more panels, basically. 1 for the base of this, plus the 3 flowers, and you need all the flowers for the 5x7 card. So if you want to go ahead and do that, then and emboss them, because we do want them embossed for the designs, then you'll have those ready to go and we can cut them up in a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this panel, which I have ready. And then if you also want to cut your greenery, so tape your dies together if you want to do that, and then cut your greenery. So I have a piece of green colored cardstock, and I'm going to do that now. So if everybody wants to do that, I'm going to check in and make sure there isn't anything else in the chat that I need to answer. And then we've got everything together and we can start putting it all together. The leaves, they don't actually emboss, so we don't have to emboss those, but the dogwood does. So just didn't. Tables jiggling here, jiggling the camera. But this, if you look at this die actually debosses, meaning it puts a little indentation in the center of the leaves. You can see that the outer edges are slightly raised. So if I ran this through my with the rubber mat, I would get a little deeper of that embossing. So maybe I'll try that too. I think it's going to be too subtle for you to see on the camera, but no, here's my rubber mat. It's always tricky if you put your die back in your die cut back in the die. Sometimes it doesn't exactly. Yeah, it looks like this one's going to be a little bit off. So that's why it's always best, if you're going to do something, do it right after. It's okay. I actually have 2 machines. I have an old machine and I have a newer machine. And so I keep the old machine so that I have it always set up for the embossing piece. So I don't have to keep adjusting my other machine. So if some of you have, treated yourself to an electric machine and you have your other old one, you could do that. You could set it up. All right. Yeah, it did make a little deeper impression. So you do see it a little bit more. You should, it should be something. All right, so we have that ready. And I have my other items cut, so. So those of you who have your panels cut, you can cut the, just gonna get rid of my stuff here. Oh yeah, here's my pen. So this one, we're not touching. This is the one with the frame around it. And the other ones, we're going to, one of them that you want all of it, you're gonna just cut along the inside of the frame, because that one we're going to use for this card. We're going to just attach it. So we're just going to trim along. And this is what I like about these panel dies, is that you can get different looks from them, which is always, you know, if you can use your dies in many ways, then it's just a really better value for things. And I mean, I wanted to use all of the items that you've got in the kit for this card, but you can see that this, you could add that to a card, but I wanted to also use the Greenery die set. And so I thought it looked nicer if I cut part of this away, so that it was less busy on the card. So I'm just going to cut. And at the bottom, you can see at the bottom here, I did leave the little bits. I just kind of trimmed it, so this upper panel there. And although it's kind of flat at the top and the bottom and the side here, you don't really notice that. And especially as we add three-dimensional pieces to it, yeah, it still looks really good. And then one of the other cards I did in this sort of idea was I made this little 3-inch round card. So again, it was using pieces of the Dogwood panel. So you can see this piece. So basically it was, this is a Sue Wilson nested stitched circles, and I made a little frame. And then I made a circle card where I just put the circle itself, so it would be flat at the edge, so it would hold together. And then I cut the frame and then glued this all on top, or taped it. But what I did was I just put this little piece of the Dogwood panel behind it. So it looked something similar to this, right? It really, I made it to kind of work together, but just that you could use it for different size of cards. So you just kind of have to look at it in a different way. How else can I use it? And I like the look of the white on the colored background. And then, so I use this piece. And then what I did was I used this little piece and I trimmed it off, and you can see I just used the other flower and just tucked it in behind, and then you get another card. And with the Pixie Powders, you can also die cut the Pixie powder paper. And so I just die cut a circular sentiment, thank you, and out of the Pixie Powders. And you can see how that just makes everything coordinate together. The Pixie powder paper, once you cut it, you can also emboss it. So it looks really nice, and the coloring doesn't come off. It's in there, and it embosses very nicely as well. So that's just a little other example of the way you can use this Dogwood panel die set. And I'm actually going to put that little the little 3-inch card, I'll put that on the blog with the instructions. So then you can make that as well if you like. So that'll be an extra on the blog. It's not there yet, but I will add it. All right, so moving along. So I have this panel, and now I need to cut 3 flowers. So I have those here, and I'm just going to trim off the flower where it meets the stem. right. Let's see, so I have, I think this one's, yeah, okay. So I usually like to line them up so that I know where things are going. So this is both those. This one's. That's not that one either. I think that's this one. Yeah, okay. All right, this is an extra one. I don't need that one. Okay, so that's this one. And the little one. All right, so I've got those three. This one, and that one. Next one of that. Right. Perfect. So the ones for the 5x7 card, we're just going to leave white and we're going to add them to the top of the design. And then for the A2 size card, we're going to paint those. Okay, so I have all those ready. I get a few extra flowers for another card. So it's probably worthwhile while we have them together to add these flowers to the panel, because what we're going to do then, we can just tape the panel to the watercolor or to the Pixie powder background. But at least then our flowers, we don't have to find them or hunt for them, as I don't know, my craft table always gets a little messy and I lose things. So I'm going to use these small little foam tabs that I have, and I'm just going to cut them in half so that it fits my smaller flower. You really just need one in the center. It's not gonna. This one, I can fit a little square in there, so. Right. And one more. All right. So I'm just going to leave those now. And now what I think we can do is, why don't we work on the A2 card, and we will add the, add the greenery die cut to the left-hand side of the card, and it fits perfectly. So I'm going to use, I do have a sheet of sticky specs. So I just saw on the website, we've been out of the sticky specs for a while, but they are now back in stock. So if you're familiar with their sticky specs, it's little dots of adhesive. You peel back the protective layer, don't take it off because you want to keep it attached to the paper, and just rub it down. And then adhesive will be on the back of your die cut. And it's reusable. So you can see that sometimes I use my tweezers here. But it will, like, all the area, because I didn't ever cover the area, because you've got holes in your die cuts, but there's layers of the adhesive. So you can just keep reusing it. When I didn't have it for a while, I definitely was missing it. So very happy we have it again. Or you can just use glue. Just use your glue. And again, you don't have to make sure everything, you just need little bits of glue in different strategic places with your die cut. All right, this is. All right, so adhere the panel, and then what we're going to do is we're going to paint our the cutout dogwood for this side. So when I use Pixie powders to paint, so in a different way than just spraying and then spreading out the Pixie powders, I use little inkwells. So all you have to do is, so we need to make some green. So blue and yellow make green. And the Aqua Lagoon already has somewhat of a green tinge to it. So all I'm going to do is add a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of the Aqua Lagoon. So just, again, we can always add more. So it's just a shade of the greeny blue, because I don't think I need much. And then I'm gonna add some of the yellow, because I can always add more blue if I want it. Now you can either pour a little bit of water, or you can spray some, but what I also find very helpful when I'm using the Pixie powders as paint is a little medicine dropper. So I can just add a drop at a time to my powders, and then I can mix it with my paintbrush. So you can see it already has a green color, and I only added a very little bit. Now it's kind of a lime green, but I'm going to check it out. So the Pixie powders, even though you have two colors, you can easily make more by mixing colors. So I'm going to check it out here, and I'm just going to paint it by holding it. Yeah, I think I need, oh, it's not bad. And you don't really have to be too fussy. You can go over it, because we're going to add the flowers on top. So you're not going to see it if you go over onto your flower. I think I'm just going to leave this. So I was making some Easter cards, and I painted Easter eggs using Pixie powders. So I could mix a couple colors, and it's just like eggs. And I had a die that was an egg shape with a little pattern in it. So I could just paint the egg different colors. So it makes it easy to actually paint your die cuts. And then, so you can see I've kind of got it green. If I wanted a little bit darker, I could just let this dry, and then I could go over it again. So it's another way to color your die cuts. We all have white paper, and I don't know if you're like me, but I have lots of scrap white paper too. So cutting out white die cuts and then painting them is great. Plus, we really want the flowers to be a different color than the leaves and stems. When it's a white design, I think it looks great, like our 5x7 card, but it's also nice to be able to color them. So I colored the stems. I can let this dry over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in another one of my wells, one that looks kind of clean to me. I'm going to just mix, put a little bit of the yellow powder in, and again, take some of my water, and oh, you can see my water is a little bit green. I'm not going to add any more because I rinsed my paintbrush in, usually have a clean thing of water. Oh, there we go. Okay. And you don't need that much. And the thing about, so I've got my mixture, my green mixture there. I'm just going to find my flowers here I needed. Okay. So now I'm just going to hold these in my hand and I'm just going to paint them. And the nice thing about the Pixie powders is that they have a mica sheen to them. So they will be shiny when they dry, which is also very nice too. So you could have made a piece of paper and cut them out. We could have done that, but this is just another way to use the Pixie powders. And then you can only paint what you need. I'm going to paint all of these so I have them, but I have extras, right? So if I wanted my yellow to be a little paler, I could add a little more water. And if I want it to be a little darker, I could add a little more powder to my water. So you can adjust the shade of the colors just by mixing water. You either dilute it or you make it more concentrated. And then the other thing I wanted to tell everybody is when you leave this, so if I left my little bit of yellow here, I don't have much left, and my green here, eventually is going to dry. And when it dries into sort of a film, but all you have to do is add a little more water. And again, you've got the green color. So often, because like when I was making my Easter eggs or making other designs that I make for my Etsy shop, I have all sorts of colors that are dried. So if I need just a little bit, I have an iris card and I just make a little gold stripe like you see in the iris. Then I have some gold Pixie powders that are dried up, and all I do is I take a tiny little paintbrush, wet it a little bit, and then I can use it again. So you don't have to get rid of it. If you want, you can clean it up. But if you think you're going to make some more of these cards a little bit later, you can just let it dry. And then you don't have to actually mix it again when you want to use it. So those are kind of most of the tips for the Pixie powders, but you just have to set this aside so that it has a chance to dry. But it makes it very convenient. So now hopefully everybody's getting their designs painted. I'm going to show you just to make sure that we, I'm just going to say, make sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay. All right. I'm glad people are enjoying all the little tips. Okay. So I'm going to show you another card that I made with the same die set, but you can see instead of coloring the flowers yellow, I made them pink. So you can change up the colors. I have several shades of the Pixie powders, but for today's class, I wanted to make sure we just used what came with the kit. But you can see how pretty that is. And I can show you a couple others. So this card this is a hollyhock card, and I used the Pixie Powders. Actually, I think they're shimmer shakers, but it's still a powdery paint. And then the pink is the candy pink Pixie Powders. And then I just also used a fan brush and wet it and just splattered a little bit of the Pixie Powders at the top and did sort of an abstract green design at the bottom. But this is quite an intricate die cut, the hollyhocks. And so again, using your paintbrush to paint your designs makes it very simple. Easier than trying to use inks with blending brushes or whatever, because you can get right into the stems. I just color the hollyhock piece and then just do a green stripe up the stem. So anyway, so those were some other samples for you to see of how you might use your Pixie Powders. All right. So now what we want to do is I'm going to take my flowers out of this little thing, and I'm going to set this aside. You can almost see this is almost dry, but not quite. So I'm just going to move that out of the way. And now I'm going to add my dogwood, this little panel here. Still a little bit wet. So it's up to you whether you want to just let it dry a little bit more or not, or you want to add it to your card. Well, I think I might use some glue for this. It's a little delicate when it's wet. And sometimes I have a fairly new sticky spec sheet, so it adheres quite well. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue here. And again, just a little bit of drops of glue. You don't need a lot. Another thing, people tend to use a lot of glue, and you really don't. I'm just gonna do that. All right. All right. Now all I'm going to do is take my dogwood. You can curl it a little bit. Mine's still a little bit wet, and I'm going to add foam tabs, and I don't think I needed that one. And add them on top. All right, then a little one on top. Okay, there we go. So there, that's basically the one panel card already done. We just have to add a few embellishments. I do have a few gold rhinestones. So if you have some rhinestones or something else that you want to add into the center, I'm going to add a few into the center here. Oops. So this is a rhinestone pack from Nellie's Choice, and it has a variety of sizes, which is great. I like having a variety of sizes so I can adjust the rhinestone to the size of the flower I'm doing. So I'm going to just add a bigger one to the bigger flower and a smaller one to the smaller flower. And then I'm also going to just add a few in the corners, but that's up to you. You could add something else if you want. If you have pearls and you have colored pearls or something, or white pearls, whatever. I'm just going to use what I have here today, just to sort of finish it off. So we thought we would do these floral cards today because in preparation for Mother's Day, we thought it was a nice, the two cards lent themselves towards Mother's Day. So we wanted to try and choose some Mother's Day designs. Okay, so that one's done. I hope everybody is managing to finish up this card. Somebody asked, will the recording be available to view again later? Yes, I know we've been a little tardy on getting the recordings up, but the hope is that they will all be available. Also, we're probably going to change how we do this. It's probably going to be a Facebook Live for our class. We haven't figured all of that out yet, but we want to use a different program, which will allow us to send out the link right away, which we thought was a bonus for everyone. And we also wanted to have a feature of just a question and answer session. So you could submit questions and then we could go through them at a Facebook Live event so that, you know, we're answering the questions you have as opposed to just teaching you things that we think you might want. So we're hoping that we'll be starting all of that and you will hear more about that. So most likely it'll be in the newsletters. But somebody says, happy to see you using tweezers. I always use tweezers. She gets called the tweezer lady, but I do like tweezers. I miss them if I don't have them. They're always something I want to use. All right, so this card is finished. Now I'm going to check out our Pixie powder background. So mine's basically dry. I don't know how everyone else is doing. This was the watercolor paper. I'm just going to move this out of the way. Whoops, sorry. All right, and so this was my other background. You can see it kind of had a little water area here, but it's greener, which is very pretty too. Could definitely use that. But so this was the one I just sort of moved around, and then this one tried to keep it so that I had sort of a color scheme, but it's still abstract. So those were the two. This was the watercolor paper. So you can see it's flatter. This was, well, maybe you can't see that. This was the what I call water tolerant, but this is definitely flatter. It's made for water. So, all right. So what we need now to do is to cut our background panel. So if you recall, our panel that we made earlier, this was 2 inches by 6 inches. So if you just made it slightly smaller, then would fit directly on the background. And I'm going to do it this way. So I have the alterations in color because that's kind of what I wanted. And you can see this size, this is an A5 size that I used to make my Pixie powder background, but you can see I'm going to be able to get at least 3 cards out of this, and I can use some of the leftovers for the sentiments. I can die cut from it as well. So cut a piece approximately 2 by 6 and trim a little off. That's probably the easiest. This size is going to fit perfect, so I'm just going to trim a piece just slightly under 2 inches to put behind my dogwood piece. Now, if you don't have a piece that goes right to the edge and you wanted, you can cut a little piece off and then take the next piece. If you like a piece in the middle, you can do that. It doesn't matter. Choose a part of the background that you like. But again, it's going to, I should do it this way. I'm gonna use that end. Okay, just gonna cut it short. All right. So I do have lots left over. And now what I'm going to do is, yeah, so that fits, make sure it fits. And I'm just going to add a little bit of tape, but again, you can add glue if you like. Just, I'm going to add it to the frame so that it's not going to be a problem when I put the background on it. So I'm just going to use a little bit of tape and just put it on the inside. By adding the back to your panel, then to add, to make it three-dimensional, you can add foam tape or foam pads right across the back. You don't just have to add it to the edge because this is going to be covered, right? So it just makes it easier from that perspective to make it three-dimensional. And I think it does look nice when it is three-dimensional. So I'm going to just peel off the backing. I'm going to make sure I've got my colors the way I want them. And I'm just going to add it to my background. All right. So now we have our panel. Now, I didn't add any to the back of the flowers. I didn't add any adhesive. You could if you wanted, but I just chose not to because it's really going to, it just looks more dimensional. You can see mine's not flat. It's because we have the two layers on it, but it just looks more real, I guess, like a floral panel. All right. So now we have that. We're moving right along here today. The next thing, so it's going to fit on our 5x7 card, but the other feature of this card was that we were just going to have a panel of embossing. So I tend to choose polka dots. I think they sort of lend themselves to many designs, but whatever embossing folder you might have that would create a pattern for the strip. Maybe you have a checkerboard or something else, or even a floral pattern or something with butterflies or something abstract. It doesn't matter. So for this, just take your embossing folder of choice and run it through your machine to emboss that 1 inch by 7 inch strip that we have. I have mine here somewhere. I was looking for it. Oh, here we go. We do have an embossing folder. It's a Nellie's polka dot embossing folder on the website. This one it's no longer available. It's a Swiss Dots by Couture Creations. And then the other thing you can do to emboss with are your stencils. So our next class, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of our next class. We're going to use stencils to emboss. So that's fun too, because if you might have a dot, if you wanted dots and you have a stencil, you can always make some polka dots with that. So I'm just going to run my strip through my machine here. I have my polka dot strip, and it's going to fit right here. So you can add it to your card just a little bit from the inside edge. I have well, we're going to use a butterfly. We need to cut the butterfly too. And I put a happy birthday here, but you could stamp a sentiment. This is a hunky-dory die set that has many, many words on it, which I like. They're a nice size, so they work well with many designs. But you can stamp a sentiment. You can leave it blank. You can add another butterfly. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to add a little bit of tape to my strip here. And add it to the card. I'm just going to do along the length. I don't really need to do anything on the short little bit at the top and bottom. All right. Now, if you had an embossing folder, it's a 5x7 embossing folder, and you had a big machine, you could do the partial embossing technique we did previously, but because it's lengthwise, if you didn't have one of the larger, wider machines, you couldn't do it really. So that's why I added the strip. The original design was just embossing, like doing the partial embossing idea. All right, now the sticker sheet that you have, I like line stickers because they lend themselves, they're just nice little accents. And I thought this looked nice on the side. Now, perhaps you might use some ribbon. You could use ribbon. But because we're using some gold accents, I chose just the sticker lines. And it just adds a little bit to the side of this panel strip. So just take, again, I usually use, for when I'm dealing with stickers, I usually use a needle tool or a pokey tool to pick up the sticker and then just lay it alongside. And sometimes working quite a distance away helps. Didn't get that too straight. As opposed to going, you can lift them up there. They are permanent, but they have a little time for forgiveness. So, all right. Stickers have been around for a while. You can change the color of your stickers with an alcohol-based marker. Just color over the sticker, it will become the color of the marker. It will have a gold sheen to it. But if you wanted a colored sticker for a particular occasion or to match a particular design and you don't have it, you can just take an alcohol marker. Sometimes what I would do is find an empty space in a sticker and just color that particular line or whatever I was needing, maybe some corners, just color around it. But they are very versatile. So you can choose gold or silver, and then they can become any color of alcohol marker you happen to have in your stash. All right, so we've got the border here. And now all we need to do is add the panel to the card. Now, I'm going to use, I have some foam strips. I think these are back in stock. So these are Long Couture Creations foam strips. But you probably still have some of the hunky-dory 3D foam tabs from our last, if you did the last kit with us. You could use those, or you could use foam tape if you happen to have foam tape. I'm just going to put a few foam strips here. These are great. These are a nice size for if we wanted to just do around the frame. These are great because they are nice and thin. All right. Move that out of the way. All right. so there we have the panel card. And now I'm just going to add a few of the gems into the centers of these flowers and just around the frame. In my example, I had some colored pearls, but I'm just going to use the gold gems like we did with the other example. So I'm going to use a small one here. Maybe you have some aqua gems or something, that would be pretty too. I always add, even though they're stick-on gems, I always add a little bit of glue just to ensure that they don't fall off, especially if you're nailing the card. The small ones. And so with this die set, you actually get the butterfly. Or yeah, it's a butterfly. It's like a half butterfly, but it's a butterfly. And so there I have my design. And what I'm going to do now is cut my butterfly. So in the example, I cut two butterflies. So one from blue, one from yellow, and offset them and added them to the card. So I just glued them together offset, and I put a little wee gem on the butterfly as well. So you could cut several butterflies and have them up and down the strip if you wanted. You could add one to the inside of the card if you wanted. I just have to find my butterfly die. And this die, if you actually look at it, it debosses as well. So it kind of puts little indentations into your cardstock. It's hard to see on the camera, but you can see a little bit there. There's indentations. So that's a debossing. So the dies that they're coming out with now certainly have more detail to them, which is nice because it makes your projects look more realistic. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut two little butterflies. So I'm not sure where everyone is at with their projects. I think I'm going to cut my machine. I don't have my big machine, so I'm just going to cut a little strip here. And I don't have a sentiment to cut, but you can definitely use your colored paper to cut a sentiment to match. And that's what I did in this example too. Just cut a happy birthday from the blue part of my Pixie powder paper. So you can make everything coordinate. So if you want to go ahead and cut your butterflies, if you haven't done so already, then do that, and we can add that to the design. Let's see how you do have the little lines in it. You'll see them. Now this is, since this is watercolor paper, it's a little thicker. So when you have a little bit thicker paper, you tend to get more of the debossing in the paper. All right. Save my paper. All right, so I'm just going to, maybe you want to make two, you want to do two yellow layers, and then have a blue butterfly or aqua butterfly too. It's up to you. Okay. So I'm just using glue to add this to my. It's really nice when you make your own paper because you can make everything coordinate, right? You don't have to search through your stash for this color or that color. It just automatically coordinates because you made it together. You made it, and you can use the blue or the aqua color or the yellow, whatever you want. So that's kind of nice about this. Okay, I'm not going to add a sentiment to this because I'm going to wait and see what I want to do for this card, who I'm going to send it to, and what kind of sentiment I want to use. So that was, we've actually made our card. So, but that was a little, I wasn't sure how long it would take with the Pixie powders, but because often what I'll do is I'll make a whole bunch of Pixie powder papers that I know I use for different designs, and I do it all at once and then I have them done for a while. Now, from a Pixie powder perspective, no, I didn't bring that sample. I have, so this is, again, these are old dyes that we don't really use, but this was a very similar way that I used the Pixie powders. I used a pink, a yellow and a pink, and then have the heart, and then I decorated the top. This is a quite an old dye of the heart. But you can see how it makes such a pretty background, and the variation in the colors is really nice. And then the other background that it lends itself to are for the Lavinia stamps. So you can actually use the Pixie powders and make a background and use the fairy stamps. If you're not familiar with Lavinia, they're fairy stamps, but the Pixie powders really lend themselves to those designs as well. All right, I think that was all the samples I grabbed to show you different things. So paint with them like we did with the one card today, use them as background. So we painted, where's my card from today? There we go. You can see different colors, right? So I use a different color green here, and then this is a little bit brighter green, whatever greens you have. So we painted with the Pixie powders. We sprayed and made the backgrounds with the Pixie powders. And then you can just let them burst as they're meant to be. So you can use them in lots of ways. And then you can let them dry in your little inkwell and then reuse them as well. You can see the green is still quite wet, but this one's basically dry already, a little bit wet, but I can reuse that, just wet it again. So those are kind of Pixie powders. If you like more sparkle, you can get the Pixie sparkles. And then there's also Pixie burst, which don't have mica. So most of them have mica. You'll see the sheen that they have, which is hard to get if you don't use Pixie powders, right? It just looks like a shiny type of paper. All right, so that was today's class. I'm gonna put up, so think of other ways you can use your dogwood flowers, like as in this little 3-inch circle card. I'm gonna put the instructions for this up on the blog, like I said. And then I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what we're going to be working with in our next class. So the next class, our theme is going to be more for men, because if we did Mother's Day this week, then we wanted to do Father's Day because it will be coming up as well. And so your kit, I don't know if you had a chance to see the advertisement, comes with a paper pack. Called Sign of the Times. It's from Ciao Bella, which is an Italian company. And we're going to use the A4 size pack. So you get lots of different images. It's lovely paper. So turtle, bird, fish. It's kind of like sort of science and botany. It's double-sided paper. So you can choose, you can see I cut some things out. Because we also, it has like some boats, it has space. I'm gonna come up, so we're going to use this next kit for 2 classes. So next class in 2 weeks, which is April 28th. And then we're going to use it again the following week, or the 2 weeks after that. And that's just because I think there's quite a few designs, and then it just makes you use the papers more. So these are the papers. You can see you've got a nice airplane here. You've got a boat here. You've got sort of an anatomy type look, and then the telescope, and then the birds and the flowers, and they're all double-sided. So the examples I came up with for, you also get a stencil in your kit. So this has various patterns on it, and we're going to use it as a stencil, but we're also going to use it to emboss. And then you get a little die set of an anchor and it's a wreath. It's like a wreath, or it's a rope really to go around your anchor. But you could also use it as a little wreath for Christmas. So it's 2 little dies, the stencil and the paper pack, and it's free shipping. So $24.99 is the cost of the class bundle, and it includes the shipping. So $24.99 with free shipping. And that's for Canadian customers. If you're in the US, it's $21.99. So now to show you some of the samples we're going to make. So this is, I just used the background paper, and then we're going to cut the turtle out and we're going to emboss. So you can see some texture there. That's from the embossing. We're going to make a little anchor embellishment, and I added some twine. So you're going to need a little bit of that. And then you can see we made a little strip here from the stencil, and I inked it with some sepia ink. So hopefully you have a little sepia ink. Then this card with the boat, again, I use a little bit of rope here. You can get some at the dollar store. We're going to make the anchor shiny. It's probably hard to see, but I'll show you how to do that, how you can use your small dies to make embellishments that look like you bought them. We added a little bit of glitter here and the stencil here. And then we're going to decorate the inside. And then I have one more card. Uh-oh. It's a plane. Oh, here it is. So in this card, again, we used a stencil to emboss and inked it. And then we're going to make I did the plain wings. It's hard to see. It's textured here. And then made them shiny. So we're going to do all of that. We're going to make the 3 cards next week, or next class, 2 weeks from now. And then I'm going to make 3 more designs from the same pack. So hopefully people are excited about that. It's fun. It's actually fun to make these cards in this pack, and you get everything for a great price and free shipping. So it's a bonus. All right, I'm just going to check the questions here. What die set of sayings did you use? Yeah, so it's hunky dory. I can give you I'll type it in the chat here. It's M Stone. Oh, where's my chat here? The sentiments are M Stone. I'm pretty sure it's 258. If you type that into the search bar on the website, it should come up. It has many, many words. It's a great die set. It's a little more expensive, but you're getting multiple sayings. So I didn't count the dies, but there must be like, I don't know, 40 or something. But you can put all the words together. Like you can say a new home, congratulations on your new home, happy birthday, happy anniversary. It has congratulations. It has a new baby or a baby, and all the words are separate, so you can make your own. You can make your own your sentiments up. So it's very versatile. I use it all the time. Hunky Dory. So this is another one. This is from it. Celebrate. Same. It's kind of has a nice font, and it's small enough to add to the front of a card. And then sometimes I even personalize people's names on the card, because I can find the letters as long as I have a capital. There's retirement in here too. And then I can cut the letters out and put them together for a short name. You can do that as long as you can have all of the letters. So it's a very versatile die set, and I use it all the time. So, all right. Any more questions before we get going? It's just after 3, so that's how did you make extra pieces shiny? Well, that's a secret for the next class, but actually I just use like a Versamark pen and clear embossing powder. So a Versamark pen, you can just go over the area and then put clear embossing powder, and it will make it shiny, just like the anchor here. So hopefully people have a clear embossing or sticky ink. People call it sticky ink or Versamark ink. But it's kind of a staple for crafters, and you can use it in different ways. But there's also a pen where you can just go on to fine detail. This I just dip into the pad and throw some embossing powder on top of it. But you can make things, make embellishments for your cards just from some of your small die cuts. So, okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I have everything. So I have to still write out the instructions, but they will be going out shortly as well. Versamark would be great, or as what other people call a sticky ink, or a sticky medium, I think other people call it. There's different brands have different makes, but the website does have Versamark. And then you might want to get a little bit of rope. You can just get that at like the dollar store or something. I just cut it. And that's about it. Otherwise, you get everything you need. Oh, and a sepia type ink or a brown ink that you can use to sort of distress things and pick up some of the embossing. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today.